Welcome to 1,000 Words, a podcast that paints a picture about an artist's creative process. There's a lens to focus on the unique perspective of a specific artist, hopefully drawing insight into inspiration as we brush up on how imagination provides a groundwork for artistic exploration. We're excited to continue that journey with our guest today. Kate Tillman-Craig was raised in Bremen, Indiana. She studied art at Ball State University, where she graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Photography. Kate went on to Chicago, where she worked in her uncle's photography studio, along with the entry fee of any younger artist, waitressing at a restaurant. After school, Kate was a little burnt out from making art, but kept dabbling in creative endeavors. The struggle of how to justify working, submitting, paying for work, submitted to shows, a lack of space, and not getting a return on all that effort. Eventually, she found an artist website that was accepting submissions for an art fair in her neighborhood. She had never witnessed an art fair outside of Leaper Park in South Bend. Her mom took her to the Leaper Park event almost every year she can remember when she was young, but Kate never really connected that all these artists were not local. Being accepted to the Glenwood Art Festival in Rogers Park was the open door she had been looking for. The show was a learning experience, and she even sold a piece of art. However, most important was finding an outlet to sell her work that she wanted to make. The art show was also a tangible venue where people were selling art professionally. She was hooked and wanted in. You travel to different cities, see many faces of the same faces, make some great friends, sell the work you want to make. Even though it is a lot of work, it's great fun and exceedingly satisfying. It sounds fun, but it's not for the faint of heart. The work has changed from that experience in Rogers Park. It has been refined and presentation has become a key factor. The base of the techniques, however, very similar to how it all started. All of Kate's images are film-based, sometimes using a bit of color, mostly being black and white. She's a fan of creating texture in an image, either through material or manipulating the image itself. Kate has a body of nudes that are all made of cut-apart, medium format negatives that she glues back together onto plexiglass. She then hand manipulates them with mark-making tool techniques such as sandpaper. After that, it's on to scanning and printing them. Technique is a throwback to how it all started at Ball State with a bit of a Chicago attitude to refine the work for shows. Kate loves the obscure painterly qualities of her prints. Her most recent work also has an origin story connected to Ball State. When she was taking an alternative process photography class, the class was experimented with several different types of printing processes, Van Dyke, cyanotype, and the one Kate still uses, liquid emulsion. Liquid emulsion is essentially the material that is on black and white photo paper that makes it light sensitive. So she gets it in a gelatin form, melts it, and uses it on sheet metal. It's a pretty labor-intensive process, but it gives her the look she's going for. Kate has always been a fan of old photographs, antiques, creepy, eerie, just about everything. So the images she makes, listen, they aren't for everyone, but she does get a lot of props from photo enthusiasts, other artists, and collectors looking for something new and different. Kate says it's been a real honor having her work appreciated by the public and to feel like she made some sort of an impact on people that enjoy art. So without further ado, Kate Tillman-Craig, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, Ronnie. That was pretty wordy on my end, so I apologize for that.
It's okay. It's always a learning process, and you're like, okay, we could always refine things as we go along too. So
sure.
I appreciate a longer intro so we can kind of get a little bit more of the context behind. But can you describe the piece you brought in with you today?
Absolutely. So the photograph we're looking at is 4 pieces of metal. It's a photograph of a tree. The photograph itself is broken up into the 4 pieces of metal, which is actually from 4 separate shots on film. So I expose each image on the metal, develop the metal, and then I build the image back together on the frame. So it's a little bit of a montage look, but it comes together as one piece. So once I've put all the photographs together on the wood frame itself, I pour a resin over the top so it protects the image, but it also lightens up the work a little bit, makes it more visible and protects it.
And then because it is a 4-piece kind of montage set, how should the viewer's eye kind of move through the artwork?
I think with any piece of artwork, there's usually a pretty main subject, obviously. And then I sort of like to see the little details, maybe in the tree bark, and maybe over on the side, there's a little extra tree that you kind of get once you're looking around. I really enjoy this particular tree for those of you that can't see us, which is everyone. This is a photograph that's taken in the winter, so you don't see leaves on the tree. You see all the extra tiny twigs and branches that are coming out that you wouldn't necessarily see when the tree has all the leaves covering it. So there's a lot more line work. I think it allows your eye to move all around the image and get all the pieces that make up the one image.
And then, I mean, you kind of went through the materials and technique you used to create the piece. How do you use lines and space?
So I think any photographer would tell you there's a rule of thirds, which is pretty normal thing to use. So I always take that into account. But I also, I look at oftentimes a tree and think to myself, how can I make it just a little bit different? Where can I start? I usually, if I'm going to make a piece that has 4 images that are connected, I usually take 6 or 8 photographs. That way I have an option, lots of options. So something I did that was kind of fun with this image is I actually scanned all the film into my into my computer, and then printed it, cut them apart, and I arranged the piece probably 6 or 8 different ways. Then I shot it onto my Instagram, and I actually had a couple of people vote just to see what, the general consensus was, because, I can put one plate behind another or move, different elements into the foreground or background. And it always kind of creates a little bit of a different visual feeling. It breaks something up differently. So as with any art, you're constantly just trying new things and experimenting. Seeing what feels best to my eye is what I do a lot of. And so I, kind of end up with a photograph at the end and a piece. And, sometimes a year down the road, I might layer the images differently and it's a completely different piece,
I really like the juxtaposition of these metal sheets of nature on a wooden frame. I think that's a very cool way to visually can think of something in nature. When you're thinking of this, it's almost kind of a contemporary Ansel Adams type setting.
Sure.
When you're looking at nature, how do you pick apart the unique details that you want out of it, instead of sometimes you get so overwhelmed when you're in a nature setting?
Sure. I do a lot of back road driving. So I oftentimes in Indiana, just because that's where I'm at, and I live in the country, and I see a lot of these things just when I'm driving day to day, but I kind of put a little pin in my map, my mental map, and I go back there a couple times and see, hope to catch what I'm looking for when the light's right, when there's no leaves on the trees usually. So a lot of factors go into it, but I don't always go out shooting with something in mind that I'm hoping to capture. I let my eye do most of the work. I drive around and oftentimes turn around, back up, look at things from different angles. I'm sure a lot of people are looking out their windows like, what in the world is this lady doing? Standing on top of my truck and taking pictures. So I usually just let my eye do the work and trust that I'm going to get what I want in the end result. So.
And then when you do that mental map and you're kind of going back to a certain place, how much of it is a natural setting, the natural lighting, and then how much of it do you have to do in post using maybe a photography, program?
Any art, if you start with if you start with a good base, you're going to have a good image. So I always try to, sometimes I'll see a tree, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's awesome. But it's just the wrong light. It's just never going to work no matter how much messing around. It's just not going to work. Maybe if you took a digital file of that and put it on the computer, you could make it work. But I feel like when people do that, you can always sort of see like, oh man, you messed with that just a little too much. You photoshopped it just a little too much. It just, if your eye is not used to seeing that, like no matter what you do to a photograph, your eye is always going to say, what's wrong there? Like that does not look right. So I always try to start with a good piece of film. So I always try to start when the light's good, and try to just make sure I have a good base. And then like anything, you're going to tweak it a little bit. So in the darkroom, I do dodge and burn. I do use filters to achieve what I want to achieve, but mostly I just try to start with a good image in the first place.
And then a lot of people, I mean, because they have digital cameras, a darkroom is almost a thing of the past. How are you able to kind of use those techniques? How are you able to make those techniques sustainable, given like a lot of these materials are kind of going out?
Sure. I get that question a lot. So I do order a fair amount of like the liquid emulsion, sometimes the film, and some of the chemicals I order from New York. They're still a giant company that services out there, a lot of photographers and audio. So that is still pretty easy to get. We are very fortunate in South Bend to have Gene's Camera Shop. They still process my film for me. I do buy a lot of film there. They still do a great job with darkroom material, stuff like that. So in a pinch, if I haven't ordered stuff ahead of time, I can get a lot of stuff there. I was actually in Indianapolis the other day, and I was like, they surely have a place to get film, because I just happened to need more, and I was going that way, and I had to go all the way downtown to find something, but they did. They do have a camera shop there that I found some film. So it is still around. Everything, if you look hard enough, is still able to get. But so far as darkroom, even when I was in high school and I was interested in darkroom work, there was a darkroom there, but it was not being used. My experience at Ball State, the black and white darkroom, they were still using, but the color darkroom, they actually tore out the year after I graduated. So I was fortunate to use the color darkroom, but yeah, all of that's going away, and you really have to look for it. But I think there is a small, like anything, there's a niche. Everybody kind of is drawn to something different, and there's always a niche for something like darkroom work and film photography. So hopefully that stays, and there's always a little bit of an interest, but like I said, it's a niche, and I like it.
Absolutely. And then for a lot of things, whenever I'm thinking of a piece or an idea, getting a title always seems like it's a whole nother process of creativity. How do you figure out a title for your work?
Sure. Like you said, it is a whole nother thing, and it's irritating sometimes, because I feel like, especially when my work is hanging in my tent or my booth at an art show, I title it and I have the title hanging next to it. And sometimes people see the title and really connect with it and buy the work because of the title. And so I do try to think a lot on the title, but at the same time, it's kind of a disconnect, because I don't go out shooting and like have a title in mind and say, this is what I really want to feel in this image. A lot of time I make the work, print the work, and I like sit and I'll look at it, or it'll just be around for weeks, months. Sometimes work goes to shows with no title. I've had customers help me title it, because they'll literally, for some reason, whatever is new in my booth is like what somebody's drawn to automatically. They're like, oh, I like that. And I'm like, oh shit, I don't have a title. And so I've said, hey, I don't have a title. Like, what? Let's make a title for it. And so it kind of becomes a game. It's a cool back and forth with customers, and I think it helps sort of make a bond with buyers, and they like that. They remember the experience. It is kind of cool because then you're like, oh, they have like a personal connection with the work. It sort of gets me off the hook, and I'm like, oh, I would have never thought of that title. I've done fun things like put on Facebook or Instagram, like, hey, just like a little contest sort of thing, like, let's name this work, and sort of go through like 5 or 10 options that way. But a lot of times, like, I'll just look at it and sort of have something in my mind, and then kind of refine the wording on it more than anything. So it is another process, though.
And then as you're talking about art shows, I'm thinking about, so a lot of times we feel so isolated in our everyday lives. We kind of have our own patterns, our own routines. We're kind of in our own vehicles, in our own apartments and cars. But more and more people are kind of enjoying more of a visceral experience, more of a connection by going to these different processes. When you're doing even just naming a title with your customers or with guests that are at these art shows, how does that kind of bring more of an element of togetherness into your artwork and into the community?
I wasn't expecting this question, I'm not sure. I think it does, like, it just makes it more fun. Like, anyone can come in my booth, and art is a very personal experience in the first place, just because not everybody likes the same thing. A lot of people will just walk by my work, like, not even look at it, not interested, just, it's not their thing. And that's perfectly fine. That's great, because the fact that they're at a show means they're interested in art, and they're going to find something else somewhere else. So when somebody comes into my booth and then they actually engage, they start talking in the first place. That's like hurdle number one. And then to even consider buying art, that's a big hurdle too. That's money out of your pocket. Anytime you're able to sell something, you should like be pretty respectful of that person, even doling over their cash that they earned. And then, like, I think when you can have another conversation of like, oh, how does this make you feel? Like, why were you drawn to this? It just further makes a connection. I think people like to buy art because they want to know a little bit more about it. They want to know a little bit more about the artist, why they even made this work in the first place. And then, like, if you can have a connection with somebody, like, if you had a piece of art hanging on your wall and you're like, hey, I named that, how about that? Like, that's a whole nother talking piece. People like to talk. People like to share experiences. And so I think anytime you can have a little bit of a bonding experience with somebody that you don't know, it's pretty neat. It's a pretty cool experience.
I like that. Yeah. I mean, in your head, you're having a conversation, a mental map as you go and find just even the image that you're going to take. Then at the art show you do, and then the community continues that conversation when they get to go home and be like, hey, this is what I got. This is who the artist is. And they get to have their own talking points as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And then using film, using a darkroom, what kind of research do you do to stay on top of the art form that you've chose?
Well, I've been making these pieces for 10 plus years. So there's always little snafus that come about, and, always things that you have to figure out, as any artist does. I'm always kind of looking to make my work a little bit bigger, a little bit more approachable. So I sometimes research, like, maybe an interesting point. If I'm going on travel, like if I'm traveling somewhere, I'm going to look and see what's around me, what the best place is to see it, what the best time of day it is to have good light on the piece that I'm interested in shooting, maybe. And that is like if I go to a bridge or a pier or something, like I've done some of that work. So I want to have a little bit of research done on that. But so far as keeping up on work, I'm not like a gearhead, so I'm not super into buying new cameras and buying new lenses and things like that, which a lot of photographers are for sure. So I'm not necessarily, I don't know, in the same category as that, I guess. And a lot of the information on film is already out there. If there is a technical difficulty I come into, it's usually like talking on forums, trying to figure out who's worked with material like this and what I can do to get around a problem. So
yeah. And then so the research has been, I think a lot of it has been already kind of weeded out over the last 10 years that you've been working on it.
Sure.
So then you kind of have a process in place. So what does your workday look like?
This is not my full-time job, and I'm happy about that because it doesn't get stale. I get to do other things. I get to spend time with my crazy children. I've got a lot of other things going on too, but I think in the future this will become more full-time possibly. But if I had to travel and set up shows and have this become my full-time income, I think that it would become a burden more than like a joy. And that's something I don't really want to happen, because I think a lot of artists that I've seen on the road that have done this their entire life, they've sort of figured it out. They're like, my customer likes flowers. I'm going to make flowers, and flowers are my thing. I'm not really excited about them, but this is what I do. So this is what I do. And it shows, I don't want to be that just yet. I'm not ready to do that. So my work day when I am working in the studio, I'm always multitasking. It's just how I work. So yesterday I was painting polyurethane on metal plates. I was gluing frames. I was getting ready just to print in a few days here. This time of year, I do a lot of stockpiling of frames and photographs. I'm going to leave here and go to Jean's camera shop and pick up 4 rolls of film. So this time of the year, like I said, I'm just making work for shows. I don't have another show until April, and then I start traveling again. But my work days are always different. I like it that way, honestly.
And then you have so many different times of the year before you go into shows. You're trying to do, prep and plan and get all of the materials ready. When you're at shows, I'm sure that's a whole different process and ideas. So throughout the entire, from getting film to selling a piece, what's your favorite part of the process?
Being in the dark room for sure, and actually having that magic. You see the image come when the chemicals do their thing. So that's always going to be the special part. But I do like laying out new pieces and making the photo itself. There are a lot of labor-intensive pieces, like any job, that it's like, here, I got to do this, but I'm going to get through it. So like any job, there's the not so fun parts, but I do like still developing the actual image on the plate of metal.
And then while you're going through and you're figuring out this mental map of places, what inspires you? What makes you stop your car?
Literally, like, is the light hitting what I'm seeing correctly? The sky has a lot to do with it. These days that in February are perfect, where it's white, like it's just ugly white out. I love shooting on those days. Blue skies actually translate to gray when I print, so I like white ugly days to shoot. So I literally, like, anytime I can get in my car for half a day and just shoot on those days, I try to. And then I find old barns. The deeper into the rural I can get is usually where I get stuff that I get excited about. I don't know. I just love like old scenes, I guess. Old farm scenes. I grew up on a farm. I still help my parents farm. So that hits home, obviously. But the trees, it's just sort of, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Like, I'm obviously not going to stop if it's in front of somebody's house. Maybe if it's down the street just a little bit, sure, I'm going to stop. And then I don't usually stop on the highways because I'm not going to like get myself or someone else injured. I often see stuff and I'm like, man, that would look good, but I'm not going to trespass and like walk across somebody's field and stuff. So there's a definite convenient factor. I like to sort of, like I said, in rural places, find some place that I can stop and sort of take my time to set up and look around. And I've never been approached by somebody and been like, what are you doing? But I always feel like I'm being watched because, you know, like as somebody that grew up in the country, like if you see a car that you don't recognize on your road and they're going slow, you're like, what's going on? And then they stop and you're like, what is going on? So like, I know like how kind of people work, but it literally is just whatever catches my eye and the lighting. So that's photography, I guess.
And then growing up in, the Bremen area, growing up with that rural background or that rural life, does that build kind of a nostalgia? And how has your personal life kind of influenced how you chose your pieces?
I don't know. I think growing up, I was always ready to get out of the area. I was ready to leave. I wanted to live in the city and I was like done living on the farm for sure. So that was, I went to school and enjoyed that probably a little too much. And then I always sort of wanted to live in Chicago. So I went and did that. And that was a lot of fun. Like way more fun than it should have been. And I don't know, you come to a point in your life and like, I met my husband when I was in college and we moved to Chicago sort of together. And I was at a point where like, I'm living in this cool house. We're right next to the lake, but like, I'm living with a bunch of roommates and like, how long am I going to do that? So, it was sort of the finding an art fair and then figuring out that this is like a viable option for how I wanted to live or at least live part of my life. And then realizing that we didn't want to be in Chicago forever. My husband's from Indiana as well. So Indiana was sort of an easier route to come back to. A lot of things converged at the same time. My father bought a blueberry farm that was previously, like it's been around for a really long time. And he sort of needed somebody to run that. And I was like, that's not, corn and soybeans. Like that's actually something that's interesting to me. And like, I'm interested in a lot of stuff. So I was like, if I can do art, and do this blueberry farm, like this is something I can work with. Like they don't take place at sort of the same time. I can schedule art fairs around my blueberry season. And I can move into a house, like I can own a house and, pay half as much for a mortgage as I was paying for like living with 4 other people.
Yeah.
So now I work out of my house. I just built a studio that I'm finishing. I built a dark room, which is not a thing that people do in this day and age. So I'm excited about finishing that and actually getting moved in and having like a proper workplace because, I make a lot of work in a spare bedroom, frankly.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I have that all set up. My family will be very happy when I move out of the house. I guess I kind of forget where this question started, but that's sort of my path of how I came back to Indiana. And like, that's where the influence started. And, I think, I don't know, everybody probably wants to get away from like their roots at some point. And then, you look back and you're like, all right, that's not so bad. And I have kids now, and I sort of wanted them to have that experience as well. And I'm sure they're going to look back and be like, man, I don't want to grow up on a farm. I don't want to do that whole thing. So everybody has their own path, but that's sort of how mine has gone so far. And like I said, I don't like, I worked for a short time in an office, and I was not good at sitting still. I was not good at sitting in front of a computer. So like, my weeks are very weird. I feed cows, and then I, go to the blueberry farm, and then the next day I work in my studio, and it just depends on what's going on that week. And a lot is weather dependent, and it's not your run of the mill life, and I really enjoy it. So that's where I came from.
That's amazing. I feel like with your photography, it's black and white, which is stark contrasts, and then your lifestyle between a blueberry farm and roommates in Chicago has its own stark contrast as well.
Yeah. Yep. I've gotten to have lots of experiences, which I'm really grateful for. But yeah, lots of different stuff going on.
Absolutely. And then coming back to going from, just working in your studio, working in a farm, going to these art fairs, how do you navigate the art world?
I think a really big part of me when I was younger, growing up, and even probably through college was like, well, artists make art, put them in gallery, put it in galleries, and people buy it. And I did not really like that option, but I didn't know there was other options, sort of thing. So, sorry, could you refresh me a little bit? I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah, no, it happens. It's fine. So, how do you navigate the art world?
Okay, so galleries I've never really tried for. I've gotten into some shows, but I've never really approached the gallery and said, this is my work. And I feel like, you could sell it in your gallery. The markup or actually the commission they take is pretty obscene. And anybody that's selling work, like, I've made all this work and now I have to give a big chunk of it to somebody else. So I don't love that. And it's just not my thing. It works for some people, but right now you're seeing a lot of galleries shut down because it doesn't work. There's a ton of different avenues that I've found just from talking to people and mostly from these shows. The art shows are super interesting, I think, because there's like a handful of people that live on the road in their vans. There's people that live in hotels half the time. There's people that travel with their family and homeschool their kids. You see a ton of people now that are living in RVs and living these smaller lives, and they're also doing these art shows. So it was really just kind of talking to people and talking to different artists, and artists are like, no, you don't have to do that. Just do this. It's very cool because you're not in direct competition with your art neighbor. Like, they're selling something completely different, but they know this experience and they see what works, and they're super willing to offer advice. So I just really fell in love with the ability to make work and make it available to the public. And I think it goes to before, like, when people are buying art, if they actually get to talk to the person that made it, there's like so much of a higher percentage that they're going to be like, you know what, I want to take this home. This is like accessible to me. This isn't something at like a gallery that I feel like I shouldn't touch. It's not. This is accessible. Like, I can have this in my house, and it's not from Target. No offense, people buy stuff at Target all the time. Go to town, but like, this is something unique. This is custom. It's different, and so I've really liked that. And that's, I guess, a roundabout way of answering that question, maybe.
No, I think that's a great answer, because I think a lot of times you find it very abstract. Like, whenever I go to a museum and they say, on loan from, and it's like, oh, this person's probably, I don't know their life story, but if they have their name and it's on loan to a museum, I'm like, oh, that's very expensive. Whereas art fair, you're like, oh, this is very practical. There's people just like me walking around, looking at things, enjoying things, and you're like, oh yeah, that art should be appreciated.
Yeah.
Individually, it could be as a community or as an individual, you can appreciate art. It doesn't have to be taken as like, oh, okay, well, it's got its own lighting, it's got its own space. I'm like, well, I only have a hallway and I have my, apartment or my house. I could have it here. Yeah,
and I think that these art shows, there's something something for everyone. Every price range exists. There's lower, there's outlandishly expensive. Like, I can't afford that, but like I can still look at it, appreciate it, and I feel like the artist is standing right there. I can go talk to them, and like they're there to talk to at that point. They're there to tell you about their work. They're there to, explain their work or whatever. So I just really like that it's a lot more accessible. I think probably art from long ago, like, those artists were making work too. They were people too, and they probably wanted to talk to somebody about their work too. And like, I don't know how accessible they were at that time either, So I just like the shows and that they've kind of really connected art with, people that want to appreciate it. So
I think that's a really good point. Is back in the, in the past, there were artists as well. They were just regular people. But to take on art, it's kind of a solitary, it's very insular. It's very, you're in a dark room. It's not the most open space. How do you combat kind of that solitary or the being alone or being by yourself with being out in the community and being able to be social?
Yeah. Again, I really like that my life is sort of diverse. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old, and so like I'm not alone very often. So the dark room is like my haven. And then again, if I had to be at a show every weekend, like a lot of the artists I know, if I had to talk to people like 2 to 3 days a week, all day, every day, I'm talking like a lot of those shows are 12-hour long days. And you're standing there and you're talking to people, like I couldn't do it. I have to have like alone time. When I travel and I'm going to shows, I get a couple hours of peace and quiet. I do my thing. But then it is nice to go out and talk to people and get back into it. And then, so there is a big contrast, but like I said, if I had to do it all year round, I think I would get burnt out real quick.
And then earlier you're talking about the community that, you build friendships with a lot of these other artists. So, yep. And they kind of guide you as well. So what's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Oh, man. That's a hard one. I think it's really important to stay true to your work. You'll definitely go to shows and it's not super lucrative, or like you're not getting great response, or what, some of the shows it rains all weekend. It's just you get like really down feeling. So I think one of my biggest takeaways, probably from a painting teacher actually at Ball State, he'd always kind of look at work and not really criticize or comment too much, but maybe he'd just say, well, just keep going, keep going, because I think you really have to push through a lot of like, even the great days, they're not going to be, not every day is going to be great. Not every day is going to be junky. Like, you just have to keep going, keep pushing your work, and keep pushing your career or life path, and just see where it goes. So I think that's kind of the best advice I've gotten.
And then professionally, what is your goal?
I like where I'm at. My life is sort of ever evolving, and right now I have the freedom to kind of stay home with my kids when I need to. And like I said, I would like to get into more shows further away. I've done shows in Kansas City and Florida and the Upper Peninsula. So my range was anywhere from 8 to like 18 hours at one point before I had kids. And that was great. I really love traveling and stuff. So I think probably in the future, I would like to do more shows further away and, sort of make vacations out of them. I know a lot of people, stop by a national park on the way. Like, that's really cool. I'd love that. But right now, I'm happy with what I'm doing. I kind of stay a little bit more local. We have a really good... We have a lot of shows in the area. We have a lot of art supporters, not just in Northern Indiana, but, in the Midwest in general. Indianapolis is really great with art. Louisville, I visit as much as I can. Columbus, Ohio has a really great art scene. Chicago, there's a show every weekend in the summer if you really want to. But yeah, so I appreciate that I live here and, not in Arizona where you got to travel like pretty far to get to a show. So that's not an option that I would have. But for now, I like where I'm at. But in the future, probably just like go further and see what's out there and see how my art grows with that.
And then starting with, a few shows just kind of in your local neighborhood and then going up to the Upper Peninsula, Kansas. How do you seek out opportunities?
So this art show thing is a whole thing. You have to jury into shows. So like I'm planning 6 months ahead of time the shows that I'm going to do this year. So that's another thing I do in the winter is I'm jurying into shows. Every show that you get into, you have to submit work. You have to show them what your booth looks like, set up. You have to pay for the jury. So a lot of what I do is I go on a website that has a lot of the shows listed. I go through the shows. I have to check back and forth with the calendar to see which shows overlap because some of the dates change. I try to keep my travel, under 5 or 6 hours at this point. So I kind of have a radius of how far I'll go. A lot of word of mouth or forums on Facebook. There's a couple art forums. There's a couple friends that I have that I'm like, hey, is this show worth it? Or is it just, something that popped up and nobody really knows about? A lot of research goes into things like this. But again, the art community has been really great with sharing info that, almost anything you ask, you're going to get an answer to. So that's a really great resource. Again, I sort of lost my place.
No, just how do you seek out opportunities? Because I think a lot of times people who are aspiring artists are looking for, how do I get started? Where do I go? So I think there's great tools to kind of get you on that path. Yeah,
I think South Bend has a great art museum. Notre Dame has good art museums, programs. I think any artist, you kind of just have to ask around, see who's doing what. I'm not super active locally, but I'd like to be more active locally. I don't know. I like that there is a local art scene, but it could be better for sure around here. I don't know the best way to go about that. I'm not great at navigating, local stuff like that. I am a little bit more of a loner on that, in that way. But I think if you want to do art, start with classes. You just got to learn something. You find somebody's work, you like what they're doing, ask them how they make it. Ask questions, poke around, like just start messing around. That's where everything kind of starts. You just got to do something. So
fantastic. Yeah. And then I think the other part that artists, once they've kind of gotten that base, they've started to make work. For me, I know the things that I enjoy like yourself, you're like, well, I don't want this to get stale for me. It's something I enjoy. You'll do that work just out of passion and your own pure joy. If somebody asked me to do accounting, I'd be like, no, this is how much you have to pay me to do accounting because that's not something I like.
Sure.
And so I think another hard part for artists is how do you price your work?
That is something I just had a conversation with somebody that I actually went to college with, but she's just starting kind of in the art fair scene in Columbus. And I talked to her a little bit about it, and, she's like, well, this show, I sold some originals and, but this show, I didn't have great, response, whatever. And I said, yeah, but, here's the thing. This is your business. These are all your pieces. You kind of have to just start somewhere. And if you see, well, like, I've been sitting on this stack of like medium-sized images and nobody will touch them. You got to kind of question, well, is my price bad? Is my work bad? Like, what's going on here? And that's fine. Like, I think you're constantly readjusting, reassessing. And so I started with a price point. I had a lot of people that sort of knew art and be like, you need to like up your price. Like people that I didn't know would be straight up like, you need to take your price up. And the other thing you have to consider is, okay, so I'm at a show and there's booth to my left, booth to my right. I always go and I talk to those people just because, you're going to be with them for an entire weekend. Like, these are strangers. I don't know you, so I'm going to try to get to know you to make my weekend a little bit smoother. Yeah. But I look at their price points. If somebody next to me is selling like $5 to $30 work, I don't necessarily want them next to me because people are going to be like, oh, this stuff is so cheap. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And then they walk into my booth and they have like sticker shock, like, whoa. My price points are anywhere from like $60 to $2,000 or a little bit over, whatever. So I think those are still accessible numbers for a lot of people. Not, your 15-year-old maybe, but that's okay. They'll get there. People, if they see a piece of work, I have had a lot of people be like, don't change your prices because they'll like it. And, they might not afford it this year, but next year they'll come back looking for you and they've been saving for the last 2 months. They have something that they want, they'll come back. So I think you have to factor in your time, your material cost, definitely your time. You're spending a ton of time just doing what you're doing. But the ability to just reassess and reevaluate and change your prices if you need to is always there. So I think that's a really nice thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't undercut yourself at the beginning, but then also evaluate through the process of like, sure. Okay, well, maybe this is... And then I think that's great advice to be next to people that are giving you kind of a price point idea so that you're not, oh, I'm next to, this person who's doing $5 pieces, or like at Libra Art Fair they'll have the Watercolor Society and they're like, oh, here's like a $1, $2. They just want to get people kind of interested in art.
Yeah. So the other thing is, I don't think a lot of people with art, or a lot of people that like art, some of them have money, just like anything else anybody's selling. Some people like money, some people like to spend money, and you know what? When you have an expensive piece, some people that like to spend money, they're like, that's the piece for me because of the price tag. Like, you never know people's, you never know what somebody's going to like and what they're looking at that draws it to them. But sometimes they've got to have the biggest piece in your booth. And if that's the one, that's the one, So I think you're always surprised, or I am always surprised by somebody will come in and I'm like, oh man, like this, I don't even know what this person is doing. And then they'll like turn around and they'll be like, I've been staring at that piece all day and it's like one of my expensive pieces, and they will turn around and take it home with them. So it's, I think I always have to keep an open mind because I just don't know who's going to walk through my door. So I always just try to be nice to everybody because I never know what to expect. And so I like the element of surprise that I get from a lot of folks as well.
Absolutely. And then when we are doing that pricing, the other part of it is what impact do you think that, capitalism has had on your work? Is this good or is this bad?
So I'm trying to think back. Last year was a great year. I think everybody was cooped up and they were finally allowed to sort of get out and go to shows. They hadn't really bought art in the last couple of years. And so last year was great. It was a lot of fun doing shows where you're consistently, like leaving a show like, man, that was fun. That was nice. I feel good. I got to go home and make some new work. The year before that, I sort of didn't have very many shows because it was the year of like, well, everybody's scheduling shows, but then they're not able to go through with them. They're not able to go through with them. So again, that is why I'm really happy that this is not my job 100% of the time. I did not have the impact that maybe a lot of people did that do art shows all the time had. So I was super thankful about that. With anything, the economy and capitalism, everything's going to move around. It's going to go up and down. Some years are going to be better. Some years are going to be worse. But my game plan is always like spend less than I'm making and save because something's always going to come up. So I don't have a great outlook on, I don't plan my life around the election. I don't plan my life around that. I just try to keep going with everything. It's got to work out, and if something doesn't work out, I change my plan.
Absolutely. And then I want to try and, as we are talking about the plan and going forward and changing things, for people who are interested in art, do you think anyone can be an artist? And what defines an artist in your eyes?
Well, that is a big question. I don't think everybody can be artists. I mean, to some extent, sure. But I think everyone has their own unique talents. And if I said that everybody could be an artist, that would be just like a really weird blanket statement. I think everybody has, the ability to make stuff or appreciate or whatever. But I don't claim that I could, be, I don't know, a good musician because I've dabbled. I know better. Know your strengths is kind of my thoughts on that. But what I will say is, even if you love art and want to make art, I don't think you should stop if you're not good or great or whatever. If that's something you want to do, go do it. And you never know, you might get better. You might learn something from it. You might be like, hey, this is not what I like, but I've learned this from it. And so I'm going to take this away and go in this direction instead. So, like I said, art's not for everybody. Accounting's not for everybody. So, know your strengths and do what you love and figure out what works for you.
Always providing inspiration and insight. I'd like to thank our guest, Kate Tillman. Oh, sorry. Just changed my page. Kate Tillman-Craig. And then thank you for listening to 1,000 Words. This episode was recorded at Wolf Den Studios in South Bend. Our audio engineer is Dustin Tversky. We hope you enjoyed this journey of inspiration, imagination, and exploration. I'm Ryan Doss, reminding you to have fun, be creative, enjoy a wonderful day.